Hello and welcome to PRPOI's May Live session. As India's largest platform dedicated to the upskilling of the entire PR community, I am delighted to bring together a very interesting topic that is increasingly becoming an ask from both Corpcom and PR professionals on the brands they work with. I am Tarunjit Ratan, founder of PRPOI, and this is a discussion all of us need to have today. So let's jump into our first IPO discussion and the role PR plays in it. So, while announcing an IPO is an essential step in the growth of an organization, it is also a crucial step in the brand reputation journey of that particular brand. How the PR team handles, executes, consolidates the attention to turn it into a strong, robust reputation could decide whether it is denied entry into the big leagues or welcomed into it with pomp and show. We discuss IPO PR today, the increasing ask in the industry, the big picture PR perspective, skill set required to execute this efficiently, along with delving into the how, why, what of the process, including impact and success stories. Whew, that's a lot. So let's get started. And we have none other than the renowned Dr. Samir Kapur on this essential conversation, who will join us as our guest host to lead this discussion with our panel. Dr. Samir is a versatile professional with over 3 decades of experience in the field of corporate communications, investor relations, and strategic planning. He's currently on the board of directors of Adfactors PR and is working as a consultant with UNDP for their accelerator program. As he joins us to host this panel, let me give a shout out to Comms Adda for partnering with us for this conversation, and my co-founders Sonali Sokal and Pooja Trehan for continuing to bring valuable conversations on PR to the forefront. Let me just add him on. Hi, Dr. Samir. Thank you for joining
Hi,
us.
thank you, Tarjit. Good afternoon.
So over to you to introduce our panelists now.
Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's discussion on a very timely and exciting topic in our industry. That's IPO PR, the increasing ask in the industry. As Tarunjit said, my name is Samir. I'm a member of Adfactors PR. I'll be the host and moderator for today's insightful conversation. Well, today we have two distinguished guests with us who brings a wealth of knowledge and experience in the realm of IPO PR. It's an area that has garnered immense attention recently as more and more brands recognize the critical role PR plays in navigating the high stakes environment of the public offering. And of course, it's a very complicated and a complex, highly regulated environment as well. So I'm thrilled to introduce Mr. Puneet Gupta, Head of Communication at INOX, one of leading entertainment companies in the country. Puneet has been instrumental in shaping INOX public image and has a first-hand experience in steering the brand through various market fluctuations and significant events. Next, we also have Mr. Lalit Jaisingh, a Senior Vice President and lead of IPO PR and Investor Relations at Concept PR. Lalit's extensive experience in managing IPO communication and investor relations has made him a go-to expert for the industry, and of course, particularly the companies who are making their debuts in the stock exchanges. So both Puneet and Lalit have not only witnessed but have also influenced the way the evolution of PR strategies happened in context of the IPOs. So before we dive further into various aspects of what we are going to discuss, let me call in Puneet. Let me call in Lalit first to talk about himself. Lalit, over to you.
You can always introduce the client first. It's okay. but I've spent about eight and a half years at Concept, and close to about 15 years in the capital market space. It's unlike any other PR exercise that you would do. It's just that you're restricted to a specified period. But yes, I've gone from the advertising vertical to digital, and now I'm putting my legs and skin into the game when it comes to PR communication. Dr. Kapur.
Thanks for that, Lalit. Puneet, can I rope you in? We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, hi. First of all, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Samir, for introducing. Thank you, PRPOI. Thank you, Comsada, and everyone, for having me here. I think it's a very, very interesting topic. This is one area, IPO, which first of all, it sounds great for any PR professional as a challenge, as a comms challenge to, to be able to steer a PR campaign for an IPO. I think there's a lot to learn. Just having witnessed one listing, it makes you wiser by notches. So I think it's going to be very interesting today, chatting on this very pertinent and very exciting subject. So yeah, let's begin.
Yeah, so thank you, Puneet and Lalit, for those introduction. And of course, it is clear that both of you have a rich perspective on today's topic, which, of course, as I mentioned earlier, is significant to our industry. So before I deep dive into the set of questions, just for the audience, I want to tell you that the financial year 2023-24, through the main board. We will discuss this, what is a main board and what is a small board. But 76 companies raised around 62,000 crores in the last financial year. And this year, it is touted to be a watershed year. 1 lakh crore rupees are going to be taken off. And I'm not even including the SME IPO that experienced a huge surge in FY23. So the potential, as we are aware, it's huge. The optimism is great. India is about to cross the third largest economy in the world. We are going to move towards a 5 trillion. The size of market capitalization has grown hugely. We are now the 4th largest in the world. So having said and seen what has happened in the last 4 to 5 years, we've seen some of the best successes. Let's just quickly deep dive into the entire aspect of what is happening here, why IPO PR is a very important facet, why communication is the role the PR plays in ensuring regulatory compliance in communication, and to craft a narrative that resonates with both potential investors as well as with the media. So the focus today will be to delve into these challenges, get these two experts to answer some of your questions. So the first 25 to 30 minutes will be on these. And with these insights that these two panelists will be giving us, we'll then take some questions from the audience as well. So let me just start by initial low volley questions to both of you. I will let Puneet and Lalit answer respectively. What are the fundamental elements that must be placed for a successful launch? Puneet, you've just done it at INOX. If you can just take the audience briefly as to what you think in your mind are the fundamental elements.
Great. So thanks, Dr. Samir. I think, see, if you look at it from a brand, brand's reputation perspective, for any brand's, life cycle, if it opts for IPO, I think there can't be a bigger milestone for a brand. And let's first talk about brand perspective and then move on to the other technical and regulatory stuff. But and something which really fascinates me, that how a brand which is which is operating pre-IPO, and suddenly the entire ecosystem that the brand is working around changes. When I say it changes, it of course it grows. You have to be far more responsible in your behavior. You are accountable. You're answerable to a lot many stakeholders. I mean, nowadays, and going by what 2023 witnessed, I mean, you have almost 3 to 4 million people evaluating you, people, scrutinizing your brand, looking at your balance sheets, looking at your P&Ls, looking at what kind of business you are doing, laying you threadbare because they are ultimately going to invest their hard-earned money. So, so this entire journey of, pre-listing to listing and then post-listing, I think from a brand reputation, a brand life cycle perspective, it's very fascinating that, your internal culture goes for a revamp. How your brand is behaving, how your brand is talking to its stakeholders, how your brand is managing employee expectations, how the brand is dealing with the daily operations, your ESG reporting, everything changes. So I think from a brand reputation perspective, it's a beautiful milestone. I would say a great phase for any brand, any organization. IPO, while it brings in a whole lot of seriousness, but yes, it has to be looked at as a great brand milestone. On
Right.
the investor side, yes, you mentioned that plenty of investors will be looking up to you. So yes, there comes the more responsible part in terms of your reporting, your transparency, your ESGs, your audits. But yes, as long as you're transparent, as long as you're doing things right, as long as you have the right partners to guide you to help you through this journey, I think it's a pretty exciting phase. So yeah.
Right, right. Thanks for that, Puneet. Lalit, while Puneet has given the big picture and, of course, his recent experience from INOX, you and I are more on the execution side, both from a strategy as well as from that aspect. So, can you share insights on the nuances of strategic execution of managing an IPO related communication and the fact that it is a highly regulated sector? How do you ensure that within the realms of regulatory requirement you generate a compelling positive narration for media attention?
So, when it comes to IPO marketing, honestly, I feel that, I'm like a vegetable vendor, who's going on the cart and selling vegetables from one street to another. Sometimes if it's an exotic vegetable, sometimes, it is, normal vegetable, or you're literally like, selling an Ayurvedic miracle or a rat poison, or telling people to vote for someone. But basically, you're just selling,
Right,
and the tools which are out there are either PR or advertising from a support perspective. But basically, what you're doing is fueling the word of mouth out there.
right, right,
Uh, it's a pressure cooker situation for us at the agency level. Okay.
right,
And, there are 90% of the companies who are coming out there are B2B in nature.
right,
So, they don't understand the nuance of PR, and, how it is going to help them in the journey, from an IPO communication perspective. Most of the times, the conversation is about pricing, on an IPO. And honestly speaking, it's a misnomer that it's available at an attractive price. You really have to do a drumbeat, out there from a PR perspective, and explain about the organization's potential, the growth that it has had, the competitive advantage. You know, take for example, even in an INOX India perspective, which came
right,
out in market in December 2023.
right,
The issue was subscribed massively at 61 times. The QIB portion, which is, for the audience, I'll say that's the qualified institutional buyer. Those are the
right.
institutions which come into an IPO. That was subscribed 147 times. High net worth investors who invested were 53 times, and retail, like a crazy lot, subscribed 61 times in that IPO.
Just for
The
everyone's benefit, there are particular sub-segments in an IPO allocation. QIP, ultra HNIs are the ones which are very, very rich people or institutions who apply. For people like you and me, it's the retail part that matters the most, and Lalit is alluding to that aspect right now. Sorry, Lalit, please go.
So, at 5 years back, Dr. Samir, Puneet, markets used to see 20 lakh applications as, like a great,
Big thing, yeah,
milestone that they have crossed.
correct.
INOX India got 40 lakh applications. We've seen the highest, amount of applications touched to even 60 lakh. This shows that India at a larger level is investing, in
Right,
equity markets, particularly IPOs. Why
correct,
do they invest? Yes, you've got a larger lot which, wants to come in for that pop. In Inox, they made a 44% on the day of the listing only. But,
correct.
the conversation out there, delves into retail guys actually going down into reading that DRHP to understand what are the capabilities of the company. I mean, no one
Right,
knows what the hell is cryogenic equipment unless and until, you
correct.
read the document and understand.
Yeah.
And,
Again, for everyone's reference, DRHP is a draft red herring prospect. It's like a scan of your company. Anyone can go and read it. It's listed on SEBI's website and, of course, on the stock exchanges. So Lalit is just alluding to that part. Yeah. Sorry, Lalit. Please carry
So it's important in an IPO to delve down into getting the positioning right, the key narratives that you want to set out, and that all comes out from the DRHP, as Dr. Kapoor
Right.
has stated.
Right.
The
So,
journey
Lalit,
in an IPO.
a question for you, follow-up question for you on this. While yes, the fact that IPO has gained traction, you alluded it really well. Puneet also spoke about it from a big picture perspective. My first question to you, Lalit, is on this, and then I'll come to Puneet as well. What are the skill sets do you think are required for any PR professional to move into this high-stake PR campaigns and to master them? Of course, mastery is something that becomes over a period of time. Someone like you who spent so many years. But what, according to you, are the key skill sets? First, Lalit, I will request you to answer. I'll move to Puneet on the same question.
So ideally, I think that you need to understand. You don't necessarily have to be a CFA level
Hmm.
individual to understand financials, but reading financial statements and understanding, from the numbers, the story, besides the capabilities of the company, is extremely important. Any
Right.
PR professional today, IPO or non-IPO in nature, needs to understand that what they were doing for a company or will be doing for a company in its journey to build PR for an organization, uh, it's the same communication that you're basically doing from an IPO perspective, but in a limited period and under heavy regulations.
Heritage.
In
Right.
terms of
Absolutely. Yeah.
how they can
Yeah.
communicate.
Puneet, what is it that you think of or you look for your agency, when you give us such an important aspect in the evolution of a brand when it goes to public? What are your
Yeah.
pointers for those skill sets requirement?
So first of all, absolutely, Lalit very perfectly put that it's the same communication, it's the same work that you've been doing. Only thing which changes is, of course, a heavy set of regulations, and of course, many more eyeballs, many more, a larger audience which is looking at you with a lot of anticipation. I think from a skill sets perspective, first and foremost, of course, you need as a PR professional, you need to be aware of the entire IPO process in and out. And when I say process, what stages, what's going to happen, what's going to be an implication of doing something, executing something at a particular process, what are you supposed to do at a particular phase, what you're not supposed to do. So that is one, process awareness. Second, you need to be really cool, composed. You need to be good at managing expectations. You need to be
Right.
good at your stakeholder management, your spokesperson management. You need to be, because they are, for you it's only the PR aspect that you are managing. But imagine, your spokesperson who's most likely the CEO or the promoter of the company. He's going through 100 other things. For you to handle him in the best possible manner so that your messaging remains intact, I think it's a very critical role. Talking about compliances, and we discussed briefly about how do we ensure compliances and everything. I think the fact that it's extremely heavily regulated. So also at the same time, as a communicator, you need to be sure about what you're doing, whether it is
Right.
compliant to the regulations. And
Regulations. Yeah.
one small even an observation from from the authorities can actually shake your conviction. It can shake
Correct.
your
Correct. Correct.
CFO's conviction. Even if it's a small observation, your spokesperson can tend to feel uncomfortable about a certain thing. There's so you need your spokespeople, your your entire leadership team to be focusing their energy on the right areas. So yes, and of course, it whatever I mentioned, it follows
Right.
up with your good media relations, your content skills, your
Correct. Correct.
crisis management skills, your it requires a lot of stamina, because those 15-20 days, I think it pulls a lot out of you from
Yeah.
a media management perspective. Your event management skills comes to fore,
True.
so yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. Those points. Thanks for putting those points. Now I will ask about the impact and success stories that both of you have done. So, Lalit, over to you first as to any IPO or a case that you think, in your mind, has influenced an organization market debut, and what do you think were the key elements that contributed to that success?
Actually, there's no
And you are
specific case
barred
study
from
as
saying you're barred from saying INOX because you've already plugged that beautifully in.
no.
You have
I
to
so
do something else.
honestly speaking, there's no specific case study as such. Both agencies, be it you or me, we've worked in this market where we've worked on smaller issues, bigger issues. The the process has always been the same. We've worked on large deals, which either are you know which is selling thermal engineering, a capital goods company, or it is a healthcare company. The process honestly has been the same. And
So any brand that has kind of wowed you, saying, "Oh, I wasn't expecting this kind of response for this brand."
I mean, we've worked on large deals. I would rather want to say that I would have expected
Better,
uh, better,
better response. Okay,
but better response. But what happens is that the market is influenced by multiple factors when they're
correct,
investing in an IPO.
correct.
Uh, So it cannot be an afterthought, actually. IPO communications as a strategy cannot be an afterthought.
Got it.
Whoever we pitch to, who is going out there, narratives need to be set. If we get time to get on board with the client a little earlier than later, because once a company files their board resolution for an IPO perspective and comes to the market, prior to that, in my opinion, if we have 2-3 quarters of actually getting the foundation right, uh, besides getting into issue related, communication that you do at various junctures,
Right.
that would be, important from an IPO communication perspective. And
All right.
there are pros and cons both to doing an IPO. There are reasons why company go to the market for
Correct.
larger exposure, better capital in terms of cheaper capital, or but yes, it's an expensive affair, and Puneet can definitely indicate
So
on that.
Puneet, Puneet, over to you now. Given Lalit, the way he trains his spokesperson, doesn't want to put a name, doesn't want me to pin him down and putting a name. But over to you. What do you think? Same question to you. What do you think? Any success story that come to your mind, apart from INOX, of course, where you think what could be the elements that contributed to that success?
I think, one IPO which really comes to my mind, and especially from a frenzy perspective, was Zomato. The kind of frenzy it had created, and it helps. I think as and when you get new investors, getting on board, getting the learning the process of subscribing to an IPO. I think that's been a great India story, especially in the last 2 years. That how when a brand, people are looking up to a particular brand's IPO and how they want to be a part of that journey. So that entire process, getting new retail investors in the fold, I think that's a very fascinating thing. And that's what, that's why Zomato comes to my mind from a frenzy perspective. I'll definitely want to talk about the INOX IPO, that how, uh, and especially from a PR perspective, that a company which is into cryogenic solutions, I mean, honestly, me myself was not aware of what kind of products the company was doing before before being a part of it. For getting this kind of response, I think what matters from a comms perspective, of course, is your messaging. You have to be very clear in how you're going to position your company, what impact and purpose your company, your brand is bringing for the larger, for the larger world. What how do you simplify your technical language, translate it into a language which is easily understood by the retail investors? How do you look simple while it may be complicated, but how do you translate that technical language into an easier and a comprehensible language?
Right.
So I think that played a very important role. How you associate yourself with a certain narrative, and I would I won't shy away from saying that we associated ourselves with the clean energy narrative, for this, which really helped, and this entire exercise of setting that narrative, well in time before you hit the markets. It's very important, that what's your narrative going to be? Are you going to stick to it? What's your plan B in terms of messaging?
Right.
What's your outreach plan? All these things matter. Once you crack that, once you start talking to media, once you start talking to investors, you have to be smart enough, you have to be agile enough to recalibrate your narrative, whether you're going in the right direction. So yes, and of course,
Right.
do a brand study.
Okay,
What
I
are your
think we
strengths?
lost connection from Puneet for a minute. Lalit, if yeah, Puneet, sorry, we lost you for a few seconds. If you can just finish your
Yeah,
last
one
sentence.
one last point. So, and also it's very important to understand your brand's strengths, your weaknesses, your what are the threats. Bring everything onto the table. Have a open, transparent conversation with your leadership team, with your promoters, CEOs. Understand your strengths and then create a compelling narrative. Which,
Got it.
and of course, this is not like a business communication. You're talking to somebody who might not deal with you as a as a consumer or even as an associate. This is somebody who just doesn't know anything about your company. So you have to
Right.
be as simplified in your communication as possible. So yeah.
Yeah. So again, Lalit, just a similar thing on a same question. Just want you to figure out any one IPO PR that you think in last 2 years that you would have said, oh, that's a brilliant PR done for an IPO. Any brand that comes to your mind.
So I think there was one transaction which I really liked, which was JSW Infrastructure,
JSW
and
Infra. Okay, Puneet,
yes,
what
correct.
what does it one brand comes to your mind in last couple of years that you've been tracking this sector?
Is that question for me? Sorry.
Yes, Puneet. Yes, for
I
you.
mentioned Zomato is something,
Zomato.
which I
Okay.
thought was,
So
was really high on frenzy. Yeah.
yeah, so 2021 Zomato PR campaign, I think from IPO perspective.
Yeah.
Moving ahead and looking ahead on this, again, a question to both of you. I'll ask Lalit this first. Considering the evolving landscape of PR and, of course, of the markets, financial markets, what future trends should companies and PR professionals anticipate in context of IPO communications?
I think from an IPO standpoint, we've seen the regulator do quite a few changes, from the listing getting done earlier and new rules, set down for companies when it comes to, their objective of the fundraise to, getting anchors, who come in one day before the issue, investing to have a longer, lock-in period. SEBI has been trying to, of course, make it easier and better for the retail investor to invest. And many such safeguards are being put in place, to make sure that they're not deluded, by audience. Like, for example, you and me both know that consultation papers have been put in place, from a fin influencer perspective. But honestly speaking, today a financial influencer, not naming anyone, some of them have a larger reach than even the TV media, for that matter. So I see that there is a inculcation of them into the process, which is duly going to happen. I mean, SEBI is already working on that matter, on how they can help in information dissemination rather than coming out there and giving their narratives and trying to influence the audience out there.
Right, right. Puneet,
Yeah.
after a successful INOX launch, what do you think the future holds for this, specifically the IPO communication space?
I I must say that it's well and truly evolving. There's no doubt about it. And Lalit mentioned about finfluencers. Once the this ambiguity is done away with, I think there's a massive scope because influencers know audience language better than most of the other communicators. So I mean, that's going to be a very dynamic channel. I think from from a larger comms perspective, I think there's a lot that I've been witnessing. The cultural changes, that internal cultural changes that have to be, you have to be a custodian of that cultural transformation. As I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, that there's a lot which happens internally also, in terms of processes, in terms of how you're communicating externally, internally, how you are positioning yourselves, your brand hygiene, absolutely important. As I said, there are millions of more people who now know about your company. So you have to be all the more responsible. Brand hygiene, I think, is a extremely important part. Your digital touch points, again, very important. I've seen instances where listed companies, do not have, they are not following hygiene at digital touchpoints. So it's extremely important. Your social media outreach is, again, something which has to be curated carefully. Your press releases, your press events, your media trainings are again become, gain larger significance. So anything that you're doing. Again, as Lalit had mentioned, it's the same, IPO and post IPO, more or less the same work, but of course in a far more responsible manner, amidst far more regulated environment. But yes, it's not a rocket science, end of the day.
Dr.
Right.
Kapoor and Mr. Gupta, it just boils down to that content and context, honestly speaking,
Right.
how we build on that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so thank you for that discussion, gentlemen. There are a lot of questions pouring in, so I will cut short my discussion and move directly into the set of questions that the audience has been asking. The first question is primarily the one that has been repeated the most: is the what are the key learnings from some of the failures of IPOs? If both of you can take 60 seconds each to talk about that. Lalit, you are on mute. Lalit, you've gone on mute.
Sorry,
Yeah,
sorry. So
yeah.
I said preparedness is extremely important. While you know your business, you don't know, what the markets expect out of you. And you need to really go out there and communicate how and storytell. That's what it
Right.
is. And storytell us, what you've been doing over the past 3 years. You cannot forecast, in an IPO. We all know that. That's like, the most important point. Even lawyers come to you and, create that fear of doing PR, out there in your minds, that if you don't restrict yourself to the DRHP and the RHP, you're going to have hell raining down. But yes, that's important. You cannot solicit anyone out there from an IPO communication perspective. Historically, you're speaking. So bringing the prospects out is extremely important, from an IPO communication perspective, and preparedness is key. Be it knowing what is there in the DRHP, uh, that's extremely important.
Right. Puneet?
I think, first and foremost, of course, as I mentioned in the previous point, that you need to know your strengths and weaknesses. But at the same time, you need to know where your business stands in on its life cycle. Where is it positioned? What's the journey ahead? Not just from a short term perspective, but from a long term perspective. It's very important that how your industry is going to behave, how your overall policy environment is going to behave, how your geopolitical environment is going to behave. So you have to keep all these things in mind. Once a company or a brand decides to go public, and it's a massive decision. Company getting delisted, I mean, it's not a good sign. It does not reflect well on the the foresightedness, the leadership, and also and I mentioned at the beginning that it's a very critical milestone in a brand's journey. That so yes, I think IPO is important, and lots of things that you need to take care before taking that final call.
Sure. So one of the question that the audience is asking is the difference between the main board and the SME board. If one of you can elaborate on that.
Main board is regulated by SEBI. SME is, under scrutiny now, and I suppose that they are going to come under more stringent regulations later, sooner than later. And of course, there is a difference between, the main board company that goes out to the SME company, which has certain requirements from a paid up capital perspective and revenue perspective. So all those things are differentiating factors between the two main boards. But regulation wise, main board is SEBI, and the SME board is the exchanges, like how you have NSE emerge and you've got the BSE SME platform, which probably has over 950 SME companies listed. And it's a crazy market there. You see a company listing at $50, and suddenly 3 months down the line, that same share price is $3,000.
Yeah.
So
Right. So just for the audience, the main board is what the earlier board was, or where the IPO used to be listed. There is a company, and like Lalit mentioned, that it's an expensive proposition. You end up spending a lot of money to raise capital from these boards in order to allow small and medium entrepreneurs and companies to raise money from the market, but at a lesser cost with less regulation. Because as we all are aware, regulatory guidelines means that there's a lot of compliance, and hence the cost goes up. Therefore, a small board both at the stock exchanges were formed, where the regulations are little lenient versus what they are at the regular IPO, and therefore the difference is called the main board versus the SME board. And like Lalit mentioned, there is a huge amount of movement in the SME boards as well, in both the stock exchanges. So, in case you are keen to buy shares at a smaller price, you can go to, of course, they are no longer smaller, but if you want to still go and buy there, those are the boards that allows you all the aspects. So, many SMEs which are raising less money, lesser than probably 200 crores from the market to be raised, they prefer to list themselves at the smaller boards rather than at the IPO. I also have a question to both the panelists. So the question is to Lalit: How is the best exercise of media planning, PR, and comprehensive marketing communication done for IPO outreach? How can we as consultant, sorry, I haven't finished that. I think what she wanted to understand is how can we as a consultant really work towards the planning for an IPO using public media?
I think to begin with, we need to understand what's mentioned in the ICDR, which
Mhm.
is the regulation being put down by SEBI, because the communication pieces are also controlled by SEBI. I mean, there is no press release that goes out, in an IPO. Everything is basis the publicly, listed document, be it on SEBI's website or on the banker's website, and the media reports basis that. Uh, Now, the period in an IPO goes anywhere between 6 months to 9 months, sometimes 12 months. It all depends upon when the IPO gets its final observation from SEBI. Uh, the DRHP, as Samir said, the DRHP to the phase where the company files its red herring prospectus, which is the final document before they go to market, is anywhere between a 3 to 4 month period. I think if we utilize that 3 months effectively to have a communication with the said markets media and the sector media and the trade media to indicate the key points, which we cull out from the DRHP, it makes the communication much more easier for the client, because uh, they don't have to go around and do the storytelling aggressively, because by then the people will know that, oh, okay, if it's INOX India, they are into cryogenic green hydrogen future is bright, and then look to invest.
Got it. Another question coming to both of you. It says, how should a PR person handle misinformation? Because in today's time, information spreads rapidly and often without verification. So, how does a PR team manage misinformation on rumors? about a company during its IPO process? And can you provide an example of a situation where this was handled effectively?
So,
Uh, Go ahead, Puneet. Go ahead.
so
Go ahead.
I
Yeah,
think
Puneet.
it's important at what stage of the IPO the misinformation is happening. That's very important. If it's if it's at a stage which is where you've not even filed your UDRHP, there's it's a different environment. There's a phase between the UDRHP and the DRHP, and then the final. So different phases. There are possibilities, and because, as I mentioned, that millions of people are looking up to you, they are evaluating you, they are scrutinizing you. So there are chances that misinformation happens. A lot of times I've seen employees are very excited, and they end up talking beyond the premises. So yes, it's important that how you handle it. I think most important here comes your crisis management skills, your media relations, your ability to evaluate the damage, to what extent you are going to clean it up. Sometimes you overreact because these are sensitive times. You tend to overreact, you tend to, so you also have to keep calm and keep a calm and composed view of the situation, understand, evaluate the damage, and then take actions accordingly. Use your resources, use your as I said, depends on the situation, at what stage of IPO you are. You might have to use your maybe your bankers, if not your consultancy. You might have to use your spokespeople, you might have to use your individual media relations. So there are plenty of ways to deal with a with a crisis, big or small. But of course you have to be very careful. So but and I honestly can't think of an instance. Maybe Lalit can think of an instance where a crisis happened and it was salvaged. So
I think 2 out of 4 IPOs there is always some amount of misinformation out there, and I mean there are two buckets to it. One is misinformation and zero understanding, and the
Yeah.
other thing is malice. uh, Most of the times, someone who has an axe to grind with you during this period, even if
Right.
it's a small issue, can create malice. And, there are third parties out there who are ready to jump on the bandwagon to, try to antagonize it further. But one must understand in that preparedness that we do and the initial communication, you did point out about employees, right? So, in that initial period, if there is internal comms put in place with respect to what is required from a uh, internal communication perspective on an IPO comms perspective, and you put an SPOC in place, you tell them that there is no outreach to the media, and KMPs shouldn't go out there and solicit or talk about their IPO on their social handles, things like that. It probably mitigates it to a 50% aspect, but you cannot really control a workforce which may run into thousands, out there, on an IPO perspective. But there is a portion in the document, for the brevity of all the people out there to understand, called risk factors. Now, in that, everything macroeconomic and micro in nature from a company perspective is put, and they are business as usual issues which may be sub judice in nature, vendor issues, etc., which will be there. One such example I can put is that for a cement company which we did an IPO for, that vendor had an outstanding of 5 crores of rupees with the company, and he went to NCLT, for it, and that thing got filed, and media being media, hungry for information, that person sent information out there, and they tried to, you know, uh, create an issue during the IPO process, to the company, which later on, when we as consultants went out there and spoke to the media, this is malice creation, and requested them to not participate in it, they stood back. But yes, the turnaround time to do these things is literally at the snap of your finger.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So a question is, one of the panelists is, one of the audience is asking that would love to know what is it that the BRLMs are looking for, and how are narratives developed to address them.
The RLMs are waiting to make sure that the companies go through hundreds of institutional meetings and
Yes.
do a price discovery for the IPO, and they set a valuation and they come out there to the market. And from a comms perspective, ideally, I don't know what the BRLMs think about PR as a important vehicle from a communication perspective, but I would say that it does 50% of the selling out there. And when we are saying, when we go out there and say that we're responsible for only retail marketing, honestly, that PR message is going to that institution, to that HNI, to that retail guy. All are getting influenced by what the media is also writing from a gray market perspective, honestly. Even though it's not a parameter that you should look at, from a scenario creation on an IPO. But yes, people look at that and report about it also.
Right.
I'd
Puneet,
like
your
to
take
add,
on this? Yeah. Yeah.
Dr. Samir, from a BRLMs, of course, a very very important part in this entire process, and a lot of time, and they are the ones, and especially I'm speaking from a corporate communications team's perspective. There are chances that you may not be aware of the process. So knowing the process is something very important, and those are the guys who are doing it day in day out, just like you all. So there are certain things that they can advise you on. There are certain things, if you're drafting maybe a slide, if you're preparing a slide, or maybe a opening remarks for a roadshow, it's always, of course it is advised to take their views, but what my personal experience was, their observations, their even in the PR side of this entire campaign, their contribution was meaningful, and it was effective. So
Sure. I have a question which is, does the performance of a company's IPO go back to thinking how good or bad the PR campaign was?
yes.
It does. Okay, Lalit?
Yeah, I would say that, how much ever I go out there and, put out key information points on the company, you can't really control what the market sentiment is. Even though you would have put in 200% of your efforts, on the PR side of it. I mean, there can be a day when the issue is opening and the market crashes, and suddenly the demand that the company had, and from the QIPs or other people, to put in money, they disappear. I mean, that's happened in the past, and that happens in every deal. Honestly speaking, there are no firm commitments that a company gets. They just give that confidence to the company out there that we are looking to invest, and
Yeah,
there
another
are so many
question on
people
this.
involved.
Another question on this part is that how can PR help in countering the market volatility, given again the unpredictability of the financial markets? How can you adjust
What are
PR to the real time strategies? That's a question that is being asked.
Whatever you do, you can't control how the market honestly values you also. I mean, today you're valued at an X price. The minute you list and maybe a week down the line, after exchange of hand happens, people exit, people enter, you're at a different valuation only. Uh, so PR will, help the company not only during the IPO but after the IPO also, because 99% of the times, like I said, brands are not discovered, company is not discovered, the person is not known out there. So you're actually creating or doing regular PR under restricted norms, for a company during that time. And Puneet can add on that point
Yeah,
too.
I think the timeline. I mean, there's very limited scope left once your timelines are, because timelines are sacrosanct. You can't do much about the market volatility on that specific day. But yes, you can calibrate your messaging, your outreach. There's a lot of advertising also, which as PR professionals, we must also understand how important is the role of advertising here, and that is something which is in your control. I mean, that's the only thing which is in your control during those 15-20 days. So maybe to I think very interesting question, and very pertinent point, that you can use advertising, maybe because that's something that you are able to control to counter any kind of volatility. So
And another question is, how do you handle a rock star startup CEO and the possible impact on an IPO performance?
Oh, you keep him away from interacting with the media for some time
Mm-hmm.
until the issue begins. Probably have him interact with the media, and also from a rock star perspective, it depends upon if he has control on his mouth while he's speaking, because most of the promoters speak out of their heart. It's the passion that drives them. To
Right.
actually keep that in check, when the IPO is coming out, is a very difficult task. We've kept promoters at bay until the issue was decided in terms of coming out to the market, and then have him indicate, because by then he's done hundreds of institutional meetings already. He knows the kind of questions that will come from either that media or that broker or that analyst asking him about where the company is going. Our job is to make sure that we do appropriate and targeted messaging to ensure the company gets the proper valuation out there through, of course, genuine investor participation, and turn balance sheet into pros. That's what we do.
Right. So there are a couple of more questions before I, go in for the rapid fire. Uh, are the IPO listing phase also call for a complete shift in company culture? Do you also advise an employee communication strategy also? Question specifically for you, Puneet, but Lalit, you can also answer.
I think yes, not entirely a cultural shift, but yes, there's a significant shift which comes in. See, what happens is there's a certain set of employees who are involved in the IPO, and there's a certain set of employees who are not. For them, it's business as usual. But IPO, it's subject to the entire company, the entire organization. So for the people who are not involved in the IPO, for the people for whom business is as usual, you need to cascade the message down regarding compliances, regarding the the responsible behavior of the company, regarding what to speak, what not to speak, regarding the sensitivities. So it's important, and as comms people, our role here becomes extremely important, not just from an internal communication deliverables perspective, but even from a cultural perspective, same way how everybody talks the same language, all your touch points are communicating the same stuff, whether it is your sales or business development team, whether it is your commercial team, whether it is your finance team, your HR, extremely important. Your Because now, post the IPO, your prospective employees are looking at you in a different manner. So they expect a certain shift in culture, even at the time of joining the company. So your employer brand is also something that you need to work on. So yes, there is a significant cultural, I would say, movement which happens, not entirely, but yes, significantly. Yeah.
Got it. Another question, purely from a standpoint, Lalit, I think this is directed at you. From a PR industry standpoint, what percentage of PR for IPO is handled by iBankers, and how much scope for clean mandates for PR consultants to come in?
So iBankers don't manage the PR communication at all. There is an agency who gets on board, which does the job turnkey in nature, and
Right.
that is completely from the PR advertising compliance, standpoint, and whatever needs to be done in an issue period, is a single agency which does the job, and
Yeah.
someone who understands compliance.
So one last question before I move on to a quick rapid fire with both of you. Any specific courses that PR professionals can take up to upskill their IPO PR? and that knowledge can only be gained by practice or by experience.
I say learn on the job. That's the best thing to do.
On the job learning, Puneet, your point?
On the job.
I think, as we've already mentioned twice, it's the same task that you've been doing, whether pre-IPO or post-IPO. Your on the job skills that you pick up, whether it is content or media relations or your crisis communications, everything comes handy during this time. I think additionally what you can do is just make sure you are mentally relaxed, calm, composed. I think that's it. And of course be aware, be on top of the game. Know your company in and out, know your product in and out, know your media, know your strengths. I think that's if you're doing all that, there's no need of any additional IPO course.
Yeah. All right. So there are certain courses. Just to answer this question specifically, I have designed certain courses for IR and IPO for PR professionals, because many of us are not from the finance background. So and I teach these courses. Please feel free via Comzadda to reach out to me on this. Now, this last section is called Coffee with Kapur. Taking, of course, it's my own original. As you can know, I have not copied it from anyone, but just a rapid fire thing that come to your mind. Puneet, to you first, one word to describe the ideal IPO PR campaign.
Oversubscription.
Oversubscription. Lalit?
Oversubscription and oversubscription.
And oversubscription. So entertainment. So it's oversubscription here. Pre-IPO, a press release or an exclusive interview? Puneet?
Sorry, I couldn't hear it properly.
Pre-IPO, a press release or an exclusive interview?
Exclusive interview.
Exclusive interview. Lalit?
I think it's mandatory right now to declare the pre-IPO communication, through the process. So your ad comes out there already, and we have to make sure that we communicate it to everyone.
Correct. So
that's a price discovery in itself.
Got it. What's more challenging, managing investors' expectation or media relations?
I would say
investors' expectations.
Investor. Lalit?
Investor expectations, because how much ever media I do, that investor is actually looking at grey market trends and otherwise also to invest.
Got it. Social media, a boon or a bane for IPO PR?
Boon. It needs to get regulated.
Yeah, so the panelists feel it's a boon. I'm sure social media has a huge amount of value to be added. The most important quality for an IPO PR leader, resilience or transparency?
I
Resilience.
would say both. Both. You need to have them both.
Right. Fintech or biotech? Which one is a difficult? Sorry, Puneet. Sorry, please carry on. Sorry, Puneet.
No, I said you asked us to pick one, so I said resilience, especially from a comms perspective. But of course, transparency is equally important. Yeah.
Equally important. Yeah. Fintech or biotech IPOs? Trickier one to handle.
Biotech.
Biotech. The last 2 years, some 18, 20 healthcare companies have come out, including CDMOs and CROs and other organizations.
Right. Your go-to metric for evaluating the PR success? Puneet?
Oversubscription and listing gains.
Lalit?
I think it's more about how your narrative has taken stance with the media, and we evaluate it from that standpoint.
Okay. Is your narrative
working? If I can put a pause to your rapid fire, and because it's a beautiful question that how do you evaluate? I think not all the times fundraising is the only objective. Capital raising is not the only objective of an IPO. It can be, it can be strengthening your organization. It can be visibility. It can be just
my apologies, but I'm getting a cue from the producer of the show that we have to wind up. So thank you everyone Thank you so much for attending this, and I would like to thank two of our panelists, the expert on the space. Thank you so much for your time, for bringing the wealth of knowledge and experience into the realm of IPO PR. I hope the audience enjoyed the conversation. I did. Couldn't finish my rapid fire though, but thank you both of you. I will send you the gift hampers separately once we meet in person.
I think we should
Over
do
to
coffee
you,
with
Taranjeet.
Kapoor again.
Yes, right. Over to you,
A,
Taranjeet.
s- a session on coffee with Kapoor is definitely warranted. But thank you, Dr. Samir, for that insightful and really, really intriguing conversation on the nuances of IPO PR. We still have a lot of questions pouring in, and I will request all of you to please, log into LinkedIn, to YouTube, and to Facebook to be able to answer a few of them for us.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for your time. And thank you, sir. Thank you. So some comments are coming for all of us. So I think the audience liked it. Hopefully, we will be able to get more time face to face as well to discuss. And of course, Taranjeet, Coffee with Kapoor is due. You let me know whenever you guys are free. To both the panelists, we just request you to just send in your inputs of 30 seconds. That will be great. We can then post it on
We're
our.
still live. We are
Oh, we
still
still
live.
live? Right.
Yes.
Okay. My apologies. My apologies. My apologies. I thought we are off. Okay.
All right. So thank you so much. We will still continue the conversation on our social media pages, right? Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you, Dr.
Thank
Samir.
you.
Thanks, Lalit.
Thanks. Thanks.
So that was Dr. Samir speaking with Puneet Gupta and Lalit Jaisingh on demystifying IPO PR for all of us. Thank you again to Comsadda for collaborating with us on this conversation, and my co-founders Pooja and Sonali for supporting the PR community. If you have more questions, please put them in the comment section, tagging the panelists, and they will answer them. By the way, all our episodes are now simulcasted on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn, so you can watch it there too. We will see you next month with another equally intriguing conversation on PR. Till then, let's continue to talk, engage, and learn together on PRPOI.